It all started with an ordinary, almost routine moment. I took my wife Haley to the airport for her annual conference in Atlanta. She often said that such trips helped her develop her career, and despite the dull feeling of anxiety, I never objected. We had been married for 20 years, and I always believed that, despite some difficulties, our family was strong. When I got home, there was a woman sitting on the porch. She was short and neat, but her serious face attracted attention at first glance. I took a closer look. She didn't look like she came on friendly business. "Are you Ross?" "What is it?" she asked, not waiting for me to get out of the car. I nodded, tensing inwardly. There was a kind of urgency in her voice, as if she had brought something important, something that could change my life. "My name is Bianca," she continued, holding out her hand. "We need to talk." I nodded again, even though my head was already full of questions. Who is she? Why here? And most importantly, what does she want to talk about? We entered the house. I invited her to sit down and poured her a glass of red wine. I had a feeling this conversation wasn't going to be easy. Bianca sat quietly clutching her glass. She looked determined, but there was pain in her eyes, which she was clearly trying to hide. "Ross," she began, looking into her glass as if it were the answer to all questions, "my husband, Frank, works with your wife." I shuddered. That name is Frank. Haley mentioned him several times, said that he helps her with the decoration of houses, but no more. I didn't think much of it until I heard those words. "They're dating," Bianca continued, looking me straight in the eye. "For several months now. These are not just work meetings." My heart stopped for a moment. I knew something was wrong, but I wasn't ready to hear it from a complete stranger. "It's impossible," I growled through my teeth, trying to suppress my anger and disbelief. "You're wrong." "I wish it was like that," Bianca whispered. "But I have proof." She opened her bag and took out her laptop. Her fingers trembled as she pressed a few keys. I saw a video of Haley and Frank leaving the hotel, holding each other's hands. This video was shot by a private investigator I hired. "This is not an isolated case, Ross. They meet every week." I was looking at the screen, but I saw only one question in front of me. How is this possible? My wife. The woman I've been sharing a bed with for 20 years. The woman I thought was faithful. I saw her smiling face on the video and couldn't believe it was real. Bianca kept talking, telling me the details, but I barely heard her. Everything merged into one continuous buzz. My head was full of vague thoughts, and they all screamed the same thing. "No, it's not true, it can't be." "I do not know what to do," she finally said, and her voice cut through the silence. "But I knew for sure that you also need to know." I didn't answer. There was a noise in my head. It was like I was in a void. Bianca fell silent, watching me, but I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. Where Haley and Frank entered the hotel room, and I saw them hugging and kissing, everything became too real. I saw them enter the room. Their movements were so calm and confident that an unbearable heaviness gripped me. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, just stood there and watched. Haley was standing by the window. The light from the lantern outside the window illuminated her face. She looked calm, too calm for what she was about to do. Frank walked up to her, and she turned to him, and there was no hint of shame or doubt in her gaze. Then their lips met, and I heard this sound, the sound of a kiss that was like a knife stabbing into my heart. Haley leaned back on the bed with ease, her hair spilling over the pillow, and Frank bent over her, his hands moving down, pulling off her clothes. I could feel my hands clenching into fists, but there was nothing I could do but stand and watch my wife, my Haley, give herself completely to another man. Their movements were abrupt, passionate, without any hint of regret. With each of their touches, I felt my own reality crumble, as the love I once felt faded, turning into hatred and despair. "I can't," I finally muttered. "I have to go out, get some fresh air, take my mind off this monstrous reality at least for a moment." Bianca followed me out. "I didn't want that," she said. "I also only recently found out and didn't know how to tell you. But I couldn't just keep quiet." I was silent, feeling like my legs were barely holding me up. I was ready to collapse to the ground from the weight of what I had learned. "You should have known, Ross. We both had to know the truth." I stared into the void and tried to digest everything that had happened. Everything was burning inside, but my brain refused to accept reality. Bianca has already left. She left, leaving behind not only a record on her laptop, but also a ruined life. The phone rang, cutting through the silence like a sharp knife. It was my wife Haley. I automatically looked at the screen and picked up the phone. There was no hint of guilt or anxiety in her voice. It was like everything was the same as always. "Hi, Ross, I just landed," she said cheerfully. "The flight was great. I got some sleep on the plane. How are you?" I froze, feeling something inside me slowly bubbling up, ready to burst out. "All right," I answered mechanically. My voice was lifeless, as if I had nothing to do with what was happening in my life. "Great," she continued with an ease that was literally killing me. "I'll go check in at the hotel and call you later." "I love you," she said. "Love you." These words, which she uttered so easily, hit me with unbearable force. I knew it was a lie. I knew that in a few minutes she would be in the room with Frank, and I would be left here, alone with my ruined world. I wanted to say something, shout, stop her, but I couldn't. The words stuck in my throat. I just turned off the phone and sat back down at the table. Her laptop, which Bianca had left behind, was still in the kitchen. It was still open on the recording from the hotel where Frank and Haley were in the room. The scene I saw earlier haunted me. I took the laptop. My heart was pounding like crazy, and my blood was throbbing in my temples. I pressed play. The video started up again. Frank and Haley, holding hands, entered the room. There was no shadow of doubt on their faces, no fear of being caught. Haley's gaze was warm, even gentle, as she looked at Frank. He hugged her and they fell on the bed together. I watched them kissing, laughing, as her hands slid over his body, and I felt something inside me die. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to smash this laptop, smash it, so that I would never see these terrible shots again. But something held me back. Maybe it was my own anger. I couldn't afford to just turn my back on the truth. It may have been 5 minutes, maybe an hour, but time has lost its meaning. All I've seen is my wife betraying me, my marriage, our family. I closed the laptop with such force that I almost broke it. I couldn't take it anymore. It was too much. I got up and started walking around the house. I was trying to figure out how it happened. How could I not have noticed that? I've always believed that Haley and I live a normal, even happy life. Yes, there were difficulties, there were moments when she was tired, when we didn't have time for each other. But I never thought it would go this far. I opened the window, breathing in the fresh air, as if it could save me from the suffocation of betrayal. I saw the phone ring on the laptop screen. It was Frank. He called her. I looked at the screen, not knowing what to do. I wanted to grab the phone and answer it. Tell him everything I think about him. But I was silent, unable to move. "Hi, honey," I heard from the speaker. It was Haley's voice. Her voice, which I used to love, now seemed poisonous. I listened to them discussing their plans for the evening, as if it was the most common thing to deceive me. She was laughing. Her voice sounded happy and carefree. Everything she said seemed like a mockery to me. I could feel the rage building inside me. Her voice was a stark contrast to what I had just seen on the screen. She played in 2 lives, one with him, the other with me. My eyes were burning with tears, but I couldn't cry. Only rage and anger captured me completely. There is no way out. I was sitting in the kitchen with a bottle of bourbon, which had become my only consolation over the past few hours. Time flowed past me like water through my fingers, but my thoughts were frozen like cold cement. Haley's in the room with Frank, and I was sitting here in my kitchen, trying to convince myself that this wasn't my life. It was all too absurd, like a cheap plot for a movie. But it was not an illusion, not a dream. This was reality, and I had to accept it, no matter how terrible it was. Everything that had seemed stable before was now destroyed. My life, our 20 years, no longer made sense. It was as if someone had erased the whole past with a single gesture. The ringing of the phone broke the heavy silence. I grabbed it automatically, even though I already knew who it was inside. Haley. Her voice was just as familiar, but now it seemed far away, as if it came from another world. "Hello, darling," she said with deceptive lightness, as if everything was still the same. "I just got back to the room. Everything went great at the conference. Will we talk later?" Her words felt like knives stabbing into my chest. I listened to her lies, that soulless mask she wore for convenience. She thought she could go on as if nothing had happened. But everything happened. I closed the phone without answering. Part of me wanted to scream, to throw at her all the accusations I had accumulated in the last few hours. But it didn't make sense. She lied to my face, and I just sat here and let it go on. I had to make a decision. Everything inside me screamed that I couldn't live like this anymore. It's impossible to pretend that I don't know anything. It hurts too much to see her, it hurts too much to remember how she hugged Frank. I saw every touch, every look, and it was impossible to erase it all. I won't be able to go back to a normal life, even if I really want to. I had to do something. But what? Leave? Lock myself in another room? It all seemed pointless. I was trapped in this reality, like in a cage from which it was impossible to escape. I opened the bedroom door. This room was a symbol of everything Haley and I had built over the years. There were so many memories in this house. Laughter, conversations, moments when we just lay in silence, feeling each other without words. But now every corner of this room seemed to be soaked with lies. Her things were on the bed. Her dresses were hanging in the closet. Everything in this house screamed of her presence, but I knew it was just a ghost of what had once been. I couldn't see it anymore. It had to be removed. I took the first dress I saw and threw it on the floor. Then the second, the third, they all flew like symbols of the past, which no longer had any value. I had to get rid of everything. To clean the house of her traces, like poison. She didn't belong here anymore. I slowly started pulling her things out of the closet and putting them in boxes. Every move was like a blow to my own soul, but it was necessary. I continued until the closet was empty, as was my heart. When I went down to the first floor, with a bunch of boxes, I heard the door open. I froze like a hunted animal, feeling my breathing quicken. It was Joyce, our daughter. She was standing in the doorway, watching me. Her eyes were cold, but they had the same pain as mine. She already knew. "Do you know everything?" "What is it?" she asked softly. I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. I didn't need to explain. Joyce came closer and sat down on the couch, looking at the boxes. "Are you going to leave her?" Her voice was direct, without emotion, as if she was asking a question about something mundane. "Yes," I replied, barely audible. For the first time in all this time, I said it out loud. I was ready. I couldn't pretend anymore. Joyce didn't say another word. She just looked at me as if she was waiting for me to say something else, something important. But I couldn't. There was too much going on. "Does she know?" Joyce finally asked. I nodded again. "No, Haley doesn't know what I'm going to do." But I was sure she would understand as soon as she got home. I didn't want scenes. I didn't want confrontation. It was too painful to go through it again. She'll know everything as soon as she sees an empty room, packed things, changed locks. I knew that when Haley returned, everything would be different. A few days later, I heard Haley enter the house. Everything looked calm around her, an ordinary quiet evening in a house that was no longer home to her. At first, she didn't notice any changes. Her steps were as confident as ever, and when she began to speak, her voice sounded calm, as if nothing had changed. "Hi, Ross. I'm back," she shouted with a smile, heading into the living room. I stood there in the shadows, watching her as she unpacked her bag. She didn't see me, but soon her calmness would disappear. I felt it. Her clothes were slightly rumpled, and her hair was tied up in a careless knot, as if after a long flight. She looked like she always did, as the woman I loved once, and as the woman who ruined everything. I watched her go into the bedroom, into the very room that is now empty. She pushed the door open and I heard her breathing change. It became ragged, as if someone had punched her in the stomach. "What the—" I was silent, listening to her moving around the room. Her steps became sharp and uneven. She must have noticed by now that the things were gone. Dresses, shoes, everything that had been a part of her life here was gone. "Ross," she shouted, now with panic in her voice. She appeared in the doorway and our eyes met. At that moment, I saw her face contort with incomprehension and fear. She didn't know what was going on, but she already guessed. "What did you do?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't answer. I just stood there and looked at her, trying to figure out what was going on inside me. There was no anger, there was no malice. There was only the devastation, the emptiness that she had created. Where are my things? What's happening? Her voice was full of panic, as if she had suddenly found herself in a nightmare from which she could not get out. I can't do this anymore, Haley, I finally said, feeling my words tear the air. It's over. She froze as if I had hit her. Her eyes widened in shock. What? What are you talking about? She took a step towards me, but I didn't move. I couldn't let her enter my world again, control my emotions again. Everything she said seemed like an empty sound. How could this be true? She knew what I was talking about. She knew what she had done, but she tried to convince both of us otherwise. You know what I'm saying, I continued quietly, controlling myself with all my might. I saw everything. She turned pale. Now her eyes were no longer looking at me confidently. They began to rush around the room, as if in search of salvation. But there was no escape. Not here. Not now. Ross. Her voice trembled, and she took a step closer to me. It's not what you think. This is a mistake. A mistake. I laughed, but there was nothing funny about it. You slept with him, Haley. More than once. Many times. And you call that a mistake? She stopped when she saw that the words didn't work. I could see the thoughts running through her head. What to do? How can I explain it? But there was no explanation. The looks between us said more than any words. I went over to the table where there was a stack of documents. All my energy was focused on one move, to pick up these papers and hand them to her. It took her a moment to figure out what it was. What is it? She whispered, her hands trembling as she took them. The divorce papers, I said in a flat voice. I signed them. All you have to do is sign it. She dropped the papers as if they had burned her. Her face was a mixture of horror and disbelief. Tears started to appear in her eyes, but I knew it wouldn't change anything. It's too late for tears. Please. Her voice was low, almost pleading. Ross, let's talk. I know I made a mistake, but it can all be fixed. I love you. You know that. I could feel my fists clenching. The words, I love you, meant nothing anymore. It was a lie, like everything else. No. Haley. You ruined it. Oh. And now you have to live with it. She tried to grab my arm, but I stepped back. I didn't want to feel her touch anymore. I no longer wanted anything to do with a man who so easily ruined our lives. You have to leave, I said coldly, pointing to the door. Now, where am I going? She whispered, her voice breaking with despair. Ross, you can't just throw me out. I'll fix it. Give me a chance. Please. But the chance was long gone. I turned and went into another room, leaving her standing there, on the threshold of our torn life. I could hear her crying and the keys ringing when she finally walked out the door. That was the end of it.